For a long time, that seemed to be the end of the story. Harry, the story went, had found peace in America. Meghan had built a lifestyle brand. The children were growing up as Californian kids, not British royals. Whenever reporters asked whether the family might return to the UK permanently, the answer, from nearly every corner, was a firm no. But peace, it turns out, is complicated. And according to new reporting, Harry has never fully closed the door on serving the crown again. He's just been looking for a version of royal life that doesn't require giving up the one he's built with Meghan and their kids. That's where Australia comes in. To understand why Australia, specifically, keeps surfacing in Harry's story, we need to rewind further than most people realize, because his connection to the country didn't start with rumors in 2026. It started more than a decade ago, in uniform. Back when Harry was still an active-duty British Army officer known as Captain Wales, he spent a month embedded with the Australian Defence Force, training alongside special forces and patrolling with Aboriginal soldiers. He was welcomed with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for royals who actually show up and do the work, cheering crowds, handmade signs, genuine warmth. It left an impression. Years later, that connection deepened. Harry and Meghan's very first royal tour as a married couple included a multi-city trip through Australia, where Meghan announced her first pregnancy and the two were met with the kind of adoring crowds that, frankly, they haven't experienced together in Britain for a very long time. Australia, in other words, has always felt like a place where the Sussexes could be popular without the poison that so often followed them in the UK press. He walked away from the monarchy 6 years ago. He built a new life 8,000 kilometres from the palace gates. And for years, every royal insider agreed on one thing: Prince Harry was never coming back. What if, behind closed doors, Harry has been quietly pitching an idea so unusual that even his own father doesn't know what to say about it, a plan that wouldn't bring him home to Britain at all, but somewhere else entirely? Somewhere on the other side of the world. Because according to sources close to the family, Prince Harry doesn't want to return to the UK. He wants to represent the crown from Australia. Today, we're unpacking that story, where it came from, whether the palace is taking it seriously, and why, of all the places on earth, Harry may have picked this one. To understand why this rumor even makes sense, you have to understand who Prince Harry has become since he stopped being Prince Harry in the way the world once knew him. In January 2020, Harry and his wife, Meghan Markle, made an announcement that shook Buckingham Palace to its foundations. They were stepping back, not fully abdicating their titles, but walking away from life as full-time working royals. No more official engagement on behalf of the Queen. No more taxpayer-funded security in the traditional sense. No more being, in royal parlance, senior members of the firm. By the spring of that year, the couple had relocated across the Atlantic, eventually settling into a sprawling estate in Montecito, California. And it's there, surrounded by the California hills, far from the cameras that once trailed their every move through London, that Harry and Meghan have spent the last 6 years raising their 2 children, Prince Archie, now 7 years old, and Princess Lilibet, 5. Then came the Invictus Games, the international sporting event Harry founded for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women. Australia hosted the Invictus Games in Sydney in 2018, and it remains one of the countries most closely tied to that legacy. For Harry, whose entire post-military identity is wrapped up in that movement, Australia isn't just a nice memory. It's part of his purpose. So when a source recently told royal commentator Rob Shutter, who writes the widely followed newsletter Naughty But Nice, that Harry has been quietly floating the idea of some kind of official overseas role based in Australia, it wasn't coming out of nowhere. According to that source, the thinking goes something like this: Meghan has no real interest in relocating back to Britain. But an overseas posting, something that would let Harry formally represent his father, the king, without living under the same roof-shaped scrutiny as before, could be a version of royal duty that actually works for the whole family. It's worth pausing here to be clear about what this story is, and what it isn't. This isn't a Buckingham Palace announcement. It isn't confirmed by Harry himself. It comes from anonymous sources speaking to a royal newsletter, the kind of reporting that circulates constantly in this world, sometimes accurate, sometimes wildly speculative, and almost never verified until, if ever, it actually happens. So take it for what it is, a rumor with a plausible backstory, not a done deal. After stepping back in 2020, Harry didn't stay quiet. In 2021, he and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey for an interview that sent shockwaves through the monarchy, allegations about race, mental health, and the pressures of royal life, all delivered directly to a global audience of tens of millions. Then, in 2022, came the Netflix docuseries simply titled Harry and Meghan, which pulled back the curtain even further on their version of events. And then, in January 2023, came the moment many royal watchers still consider the point of no return, Harry's memoir, Spare. It was blunt, deeply personal, and at times devastating for the relatives it described, including, most notably, his brother, Prince William. Details about physical altercations, private conversations, and long-simmering resentments were suddenly public property, printed and sold in bookstores around the world. For William, in particular, Spare is widely reported to have been the breaking point. Whatever bridges existed before the book, sources say the relationship between the two brothers has never fully recovered since. Around the same time, a separate and less emotional but equally consequential fight was unfolding, this one in the courts. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, they lost their automatic entitlement to the same level of UK government-funded security they'd had as senior royals. Harry challenged that decision, arguing it put his family at risk whenever they visited Britain. That legal fight dragged on for years. And in the summer of 2026, Harry lost his related privacy case against a major UK newspaper group at the High Court, a defeat that, according to royal commentators, weighed on him even as other parts of his UK visit that same week were going far better than expected. Because just days after that legal setback, something remarkable happened. Harry travelled to Birmingham for an event marking 1 year until the next Invictus Games, and received what witnesses described as a genuinely warm, enthusiastic reception from the British public. It was a reminder that whatever the tabloids say about Harry's popularity, the Invictus Games still commands real public affection. Then, on July 10, 2026, came the moment that's driving so much of this current conversation. King Charles quietly welcomed Harry, Meghan, and their children, Archie and Lilibet, to Highgrove House, his private country residence in Gloucestershire. It was reportedly the first time Charles and Camilla had seen the two children in person in years, and by some accounts, the first time in 4 years the king had spent time with his grandchildren at all. There were no official photographs. No palace statement laying out what was discussed. Just confirmation, eventually, that the meeting happened, a rare moment of the family choosing privacy over spectacle. And yet, for everyone celebrating signs of a thaw between Harry and his father, one detail stood out immediately: Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, were nowhere to be seen. Royal commentators were quick to point out that this likely wasn't an oversight. William, according to multiple sources, has made it clear he wants no part of what's been described as Sussex drama, and continues to feel that any reconciliation attempted without him in the room isn't really a family reconciliation at all. It's against that backdrop, a father cautiously reopening the door, a brother firmly keeping his side of it shut, and a public that seems more forgiving than the institution itself, that the Australia rumour landed. According to the sources cited by Rob Shutter, Harry has, at some point, privately raised the idea of some kind of official role serving the crown from overseas, with Australia as the leading candidate. The reported inspiration is a genuinely fascinating piece of royal history. The Duke of Windsor, the former King Edward VIII, who abdicated the throne in 1936, went on to serve as governor of the Bahamas during the Second World War, a formal royal posting carried out entirely outside of Britain. It's an evocative parallel, and not necessarily a comfortable one. The Duke of Windsor is remembered by history for giving up the throne for love, and for a legacy that remains, at best, complicated. Whether Harry or his advisors intended that comparison to land quite so heavily is unclear. But it's the kind of historical echo that royal commentators haven't been shy about pointing out. There's just one enormous problem with the plan. According to the same reporting, the role Harry may have his eye on, something in the mould of Governor-General, isn't actually the King's to give. In Australia's constitutional system, the Governor-General is formally appointed by the monarch, but only on the advice of the sitting Australian Prime Minister. Buckingham Palace has no real influence over who gets chosen. Which means that even if King Charles wanted to hand his son a ceremonial role in Sydney or Canberra, it's simply not a decision that sits within his power. Beyond the constitutional roadblock, there's an institutional one too. Multiple sources describe the palace's position as unambiguous. There is no such thing, in their view, as being half in and half out. If Harry stepped back from being a working royal, the thinking goes, he stepped back, full stop. Royal duties, official titles, and formal crown representation aren't something you can pick back up part-time from 6,000 miles away, no matter how good the intentions. One insider summed up the gap perfectly: Harry may still dream of being a working royal again. Inside the palace, that chapter has already been closed. On one side, there's a segment of royal watchers, and, frankly, ordinary members of the public, who see something almost touching in the story. A son who left, who spent years estranged from a family he clearly still loves, quietly looking for any version of duty that lets him reconnect with his father without undoing the life he's built for his own children. Seen that way, the Australia idea isn't a power grab. It's a compromise, offered by a man who genuinely doesn't know how else to bridge the distance. On the other side, there's real skepticism, and some outright frustration. Critics point out that Harry and Meghan have continued to describe their overseas trips, to countries like Colombia and Nigeria, using their Sussex titles, trips that some commentators have pointedly labelled for royal tours. And Australia, specifically, has its own recent controversy attached to it. Reports suggest a previous Invictus-branded visit down under, and the public funds spent on security for it, contributed directly to friction over Australian government support for future events. For people already uneasy about the Sussexes trading on royal status while living outside the institution, a new push for an official Australian role plays as exactly the kind of having it both ways they've criticised for years. Then there's the reaction from inside the family itself, at least as described by royal sources. Prince William, we're told, has grown increasingly frustrated, not just by the Australia rumour specifically, but by a broader pattern: private letters referencing hopes of returning to Australia, continued use of royal styling on official-looking correspondence, and a general sense, in his camp, that Harry and Meghan haven't actually let go of the identity they say they stepped away from. To William, according to one source, that framing isn't nostalgic. It's a lingering claim to a role his brother chose to leave, and it's reportedly seen less as an emotional family issue and more as a genuine institutional threat to the monarchy's image. Royal commentators, meanwhile, have been more measured but no less direct. Several have pointed out that reconciliation between Charles and Harry, however real it might be, is fundamentally a different project than reinstating Harry as any kind of official royal representative. One well-known commentator put it plainly: this is a personal, family-level negotiation between a father and son, not something that carries institutional weight. And more than one has warned that any reconciliation effort that leaves William out of the loop entirely risks becoming its own source of conflict, rather than a solution to the existing one. Being a working royal isn't just a job title, it's an entire ecosystem of formal duties, government funding, security arrangements, and constitutional expectations, all built around the idea that senior royals represent the crown full-time, in exchange for the privileges that come with it. When Harry and Meghan stepped back in 2020, they didn't just lose a schedule of ribbon cuttings and charity visits. They lost their place inside that entire framework, including, crucially, the automatic government-funded protection that comes with being a senior working royal. That's precisely why the security issue keeps resurfacing every time Harry visits the UK. It's not just about money or logistics. It's a symbol of exactly where the line sits between prince as a title he still holds, and working royal as a role he no longer occupies. And that distinction is exactly what makes the Australia rumour so complicated. A Governor-General style position would require exactly the kind of formal, institutional recognition that Harry gave up, the very thing the palace insiders say simply isn't on the table for someone who's already stepped outside the system. There's also the matter of precedent. Royal historians are quick to point out that the monarchy has, throughout its history, been extremely cautious about creating special exceptions for individual family members, precisely because those exceptions tend to create pressure for more exceptions down the line. If Harry were given some kind of unique overseas crown role despite having stepped back from official duties, it would raise an obvious question for the rest of the family, and for future generations of royals who might want the same flexibility: why him, and not them? And then there's the human layer underneath all of this, which is easy to lose in the constitutional detail. King Charles is 77 years old and continuing treatment for cancer. Royal commentators have repeatedly framed his recent willingness to quietly meet with Harry's family, first at Clarence House, then at Highgrove, as a father acting on limited time, prioritizing his relationship with his son and grandchildren over institutional caution. That's very different from the king making a calculated decision about Harry's formal royal future. One is personal. The other is political. And right now, according to nearly everyone watching this story closely, only the first one is actually happening. Publicly, there's been no confirmation from Buckingham Palace of any Australia role being discussed, considered, or planned. There's been no statement from Harry himself addressing the rumour directly. What we have is anonymous sourcing, filtered through a royal newsletter, describing private conversations that, even if they happened, appear to have gone nowhere so far, constitutionally or institutionally. What we do know, with far more confidence, is the emotional temperature of the family right now. Harry and King Charles appear to be in a genuine, if fragile, period of reconnection, private meetings, quiet visits, an apparent mutual desire to rebuild something after years of public rupture. At the same time, the relationship between Harry and Prince William remains, by every account, essentially frozen. No public thaw. No signs of an imminent brotherly reunion. If anything, sources suggest William's frustration may be deepening, not easing, as stories like this Australia rumour keep circulating. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's actual day-to-day life continues largely as it has for years, based in Montecito, raising Archie and Lilibet away from the British press, running their own ventures, and occasionally stepping into the international spotlight, whether through the Invictus Games, humanitarian trips, or high-profile legal battles like the one Harry just lost against Associated Newspapers. So the honest answer, as of right now, is this: there's no evidence Harry is actually getting an official Australian role. But there is real evidence that he hasn't given up on some version of formally serving the crown, and real evidence that his father, at least on a personal level, hasn't given up on him either. Whether that ever translates into an actual title, an actual posting, or an actual place on the world stage again remains, for now, an open question. It's about a family trying to figure out whether reconciliation and role can ever exist in the same sentence again. Whether a prince who very publicly walked away can find a way back in that doesn't require undoing the life, and the marriage, and the children he built on the other side of that decision. And whether an institution built on precedent and protocol has any room left for a compromise that's never existed before. King Charles seems willing to open the door, at least as a father. William, at least for now, does not. And Harry, according to those closest to him, is still searching for some version of duty that lets him hold on to both worlds, the one he left, and the one he built to replace it. Whether that search ever leads him to Australia, or anywhere else wearing an official crown title, is still very much unwritten. But if this story tells us anything, it's that 6 years after Megxit, the door between Harry and the monarchy he stepped away from has never actually been fully closed. It's just been left ajar, waiting to see who, if anyone, walks through it next. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal family's most complicated relationship, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of every twist in the Harry, Meghan, and royal family saga as it unfolds. And I want to hear from you. Do you think Harry should be given some kind of official role again, in Australia or anywhere else, or has that chapter of his life truly closed for good? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll be featuring some of your takes in an upcoming video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.